Hi, my name is Jackson and welcome to UPW IT Center. Today we're gonna talk about how to execute a transaction without authorization. This is the quick tip for today. How to execute a transaction without authorization. For some reasons, sometimes in a project, maybe you don't have all the access you need, or for a specific transaction that you don't have the access. For some urgent matter, you have no option and you need to access this transaction to solve some issue. This quick tip is not recommendable if you work for an organization or a company that is very strict with access and have a strong procedure and very strict procedure. Do not do this quick tip in case you work for a company that's not allowed to do that. So sometimes you have no other options and you need to analyze transaction code in production, and this is the case that you can use this functional model or the quick tips that we gonna teach for today. Some important thing to mention here in the beginning, it's for execute a transaction without authorization, the techniques that we're gonna teach for today, especially you need access for SE37 or SE38 transaction, that's ABAP transaction codes. So if you don't have these transaction codes, you are not able to do these procedures. So first check if you have this access for SE37 and SE38. If you first have these transaction codes, you're gonna be able to proceed like that. The first procedure that's possible to execute a transaction without authorization is using this functional model, authorization check T code. Insert a breakpoint in this if inside the functional model, you will be able to overcome the authorization error. Basically, this is the first option. After you set the breakpoint inside the functional model, you're gonna execute the transaction that you want to use and you don't have it authorization. You can use the functional model itself to process the transaction, or you can put in the command field, and sometimes it will be necessary to activate the debug. So you're gonna put /h and activate the debug, and after put your transaction. And sometimes it's not required. It depends the environment, how the environment is configured. Sometimes you will be necessary to put the transaction only, and sometimes you're gonna activate the debug first. So after you process your transaction, execute your transaction, the screen of debug will show up, and you're gonna stop in this line that is a if sy sub erc, and probably the value here in the variable will be 4. It means that it's not acceptable for you to use this transaction, but you're gonna change for 0 and move on to the next screen using this transaction. So you're gonna push F8 and execute until the final of the program to find out and finally see your transaction that you want to use. So guys, right now we're gonna do a demonstration inside the system. I need to say that for this test environment I have a sapmm profile, so I have access for the most of transactions. So here I cannot simulate a transaction that I don't have the access, but if you follow exactly the step-by-step procedure that I'm gonna show, we will not have problems. So let's see how to do that. here we are in the transaction SC37, right? You just need to type the function model, click on display. So inside the function model, you do a page down and you can see the call of this function model and the if that indicates if this was successful or if you have some error of authorization. You're gonna set the breakpoint here and go out of the transaction. Next step, you can insert the transaction that you're gonna access. I'm typing SC4. If you know this transaction, you know that's very dangerous transaction. That is not a transaction that all the functional consultants can access, only the basis consultants, because you can open the environment for do any configuration. So in this case, as you can see, after processing the transaction, I just stopped exactly the breakpoint that I have set. So here, if I double click in this variable SCI sub RC, in your case, if you have no access, the value should be 4, for example, different from 0. But in my case, since I have a SAPL profile, it's 0. But in your case, you should be able to change here and put 0, right? And enter. And after, do a F8 to process until the final of the program. And finally, you can see the transaction that you want to change. So the second option is using the function model transaction call via RFC. The method is very simple. It's just execute the function model and fulfill the transaction code. Let's see a demonstration. Again, we are in the transaction SC37. You're gonna click in test execute F8. And here you fulfill your transaction code that you want to access. Here you're gonna have a message, and here is the transaction. I need to advise that sometimes this, depending of the version that you are working, this function model will not gonna work itself. So you need to combine the breakpoint from the first function model, set the breakpoint, and after use this function model to access the transaction if you can't using the command code field. So you can combine the first breakpoint that I just talked about and also this function model to access the transaction. Third option is using this function model RS HDC's call TC variant and remove the flag of authority check. Let's see another demonstration using this function model. You just need to test execute again, and here as you can see you have a T code, so you can fulfill the T code again that you're gonna access and remove these flags, all these flags, and execute again. So here you're already in the transaction. So the option for using another function model is basically the same scheme, the same procedure. Is just insert your T code and process. Let's see another demonstration. We have the function model, test execute, and type your transaction and execute. So all these function models sometimes depending of the environment will not work only using the function model, but sometimes you need to set a breakpoint. Combination between the breakpoint and these function models you will be able to access the transaction that you want to use. So now is the option 5, and it's the last option that we present today. This is a very good option if you have the SE38 and the transaction that you want to execute is a report transaction. This will work fine. Also, you need to have access for SE16 or SE16N. So the both transactions, it's to visualize a table. You're gonna display the table TSTC, enter the transaction code, execute, and if the field PGMNA has an entry, it's possible to access this transaction using the program. After, you can go to transaction SE38 and or SEA38 and execute the program, and basically it's the same that execute the transaction. By running the program directly, this is what I already explained, and this screen I'm showing how to execute the program. So let's do a demonstration. The first step is access the SE16N, put the table TSTC here, and the transaction code you want to know the program. So this is the field PGMNA. For our transaction code that we are testing today, as you can see, we don't have a program in this table, so it's not possible to just execute by program, running the program directly. Let's see another one, for example SM04. For this one we have the program. Let's copy and paste and open another screen with SE38, put the program, execute, and here we have the results of this report. That's basically a basis transaction. Today we learned how to execute a transaction without authorization using a function model, authorization check T code that we set a breakpoint and process the transaction. Also, I have explained some SAP function model that call transaction without authorization checks, but sometimes you need to combine it with the first solution using the breakpoint, because maybe it's not possible only using the function models. And the third option that I said, it's basically using the program itself, running the program to access the SAP transaction. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you and see you next time.